All right, welcome back to Dreamcast. We're diving back into the Dream Journal.
Yeah, picking up right where we left off.
We are, and today we're looking at the entry from April 2nd, 2025.
Okay, April 2nd. Interesting. So, what kind of adventures did our dreamer have on this particular night?
Well, this time we find our dreamer in a pretty high-tech setting.
Oh, high-tech. Okay, so like spaceships, aliens, time travel.
Not quite, although I'm sure those would make for some really wild dreams.
You're telling me. I'm always a sucker for a good time travel dream.
This one is more grounded in, let's say, near-future technology. He finds himself in a computer lab, but not just any computer lab.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Not just any computer lab. So we're not talking about dusty desktops and flickering fluorescent lights.
Definitely not. This is way more, well, futuristic. Picture this. Floating holographic blue screens all around. It's like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Whoa, that's pretty cool. I can almost see it. Holographic screens, huh? That sounds super high-tech. I wonder if that says anything about how our dreamer used technology or maybe even his own creative process.
That's a really good point. I mean, we do know that he's an application developer, right? And he's dabbled in AI stuff like that Dream Anime and Dream Tunes project.
Yeah, that's right. So maybe this futuristic lab is kind of like a symbolic representation of his own mind, or at least the creative part of it. And the holographic screens could be like ideas taking shape.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. So in this super advanced lab, what's our dreamer up to?
Yeah, what's the mission objective in this dream?
Well, it seems like his main focus is on perfecting the design of his latest and greatest invention. He actually refers to it as his magnum opus in the dream.
Magnum opus, huh? That's a pretty big deal. So we're talking about something he considers to be his masterpiece, his most important creation. What is this groundbreaking invention?
You're not going to believe this. He's building a robot.
A robot. Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah.
Everyone loves a good robot. Tell me more. What's this robot like?
Well, he describes it in pretty vivid detail. It has a sleek black paint job with some silver accents, giving it a very modern, maybe even kind of stealthy look. But the really striking features are its single glowing red eye and a rather unique bowl-shaped head.
A single red eye and a bowl-shaped head. That's a pretty memorable visual. I'm already getting some symbolic vibes from those details.
I know, right? They definitely stand out. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we got to figure out what this robot is actually supposed to do.
Yeah, good point. What's the function of this robotic masterpiece?
Get this. Its core function is to recognize, scan, and then, get this, emulate the powers of both superheroes and supervillains.
Whoa, hold on. It can copy superpowers. That's insane. Okay, we got to break this down. First of all, superheroes and supervillains, that's a theme we've seen pop up in his dreams before, hasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a recurring motif. Like that time he dreamt he was flying alongside Superman.
Right, exactly. So maybe this fascination with superheroes and supervillains speaks to some kind of internal conflict or duality he's grappling with.
Maybe. Or maybe he's just really into comic books.
Uh-huh, yeah. That's always a possibility. But I think there's got to be more to it than that. I mean, the fact that he's created a robot that can copy these powers suggests a desire to understand them, maybe even possess them in some way.
That's a good point. But then there's the whole emulation thing. It's not like the robot is inventing new powers. It's just copying existing ones.
True. That's an important distinction. Maybe it's about learning and adaptation. Like he's taking inspiration from these powerful figures and trying to figure out how to apply those same principles to his own life, his own work.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But there's another wrinkle to this dream. It's not all smooth sailing in robot building land. There's a bit of a time crunch.
Oh no, a time crunch. What kind of pressure is our dreamer under?
Well, he's facing some pretty tight deadlines, which is something I think a lot of us can relate to, right?
Ugh, tell me about it. Deadlines are the worst.
I know, right? And in this case, the pressure is so intense that he's forced to release his superbot, as he calls it, into the field earlier than planned.
Releasing it early?
Yeah.
Oh, that's got to be nerve-wracking.
Right.
It's like putting something out into the world before you feel it's truly ready. I can only imagine the anxiety that comes with that.
Yeah, and that anxiety definitely comes through in the dream. He spends the rest of the dream feeling a mix of apprehension and anticipation. He's worried about how his creation will perform in the real world, but he's also hopeful.
It's like that feeling you get when you launch a new project or share a piece of writing with the world. You're excited, but also terrified at the same time.
Exactly. And there's this really telling detail at the end of the dream. He's meticulously monitoring the robot's error logs.
Error logs. That's interesting. What do you think that symbolizes?
Well, on a practical level, it makes sense. If you release a robot that can potentially mimic superpowers, you want to make sure it's not going to go rogue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. But I think there's a deeper meaning here, too. Those error logs could represent his own self-doubt, his fear of making mistakes.
Or maybe his desire for perfection. Like, he's so invested in his creation that he can't help but scrutinize every little detail, looking for any sign of imperfection.
That's a good point. It ties back to the whole magnum opus thing. If you consider something to be your masterpiece, you're going to be extra critical of it.
Absolutely. So we've got this futuristic lab, this superpower emulating robot, and all this anxiety around its release. Where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, let's start with this setting. This futuristic computer lab, with its holographic screens and advanced technology. What do you think that represents?
I think it's safe to say that it symbolizes his engagement with technology, especially given his career as an application developer. And the futuristic aspect of it could suggest that he's always pushing the boundaries, looking for new and innovative ways to create.
I like that. It's like he's envisioning a world where technology has advanced even further, and he's at the forefront of that advancement. And the holographic screens could represent the boundless possibilities of the digital realm, a space where anything is possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like those screens are windows into his imagination where ideas can take shape without the limitations of the physical world.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to the robot itself. This humanoid creation with the ability to mimic superpowers. What do you make of that?
I think it's a representation of his fascination with power, but not just any kind of power. It's the power of these larger-than-life figures, these superheroes and supervillains who embody extreme versions of good and evil.
Right, and by creating a robot that can emulate those powers, he's essentially trying to understand them, deconstruct them. It's like he's asking, what makes a hero? What makes a villain? And how can I harness those qualities in my own life?
And the fact that the robot can mimic both heroic and villainous powers suggests that he's interested in the full spectrum of human potential, the good and the bad.
That's a really insightful point. It's like he's acknowledging that we all have the capacity for both greatness and darkness, and he's exploring those extremes through this robotic creation.
And the whole emulation thing, I think that speaks to his creative process. He's not necessarily trying to invent something entirely new, but rather to learn from the greats, to take inspiration from existing sources and adapt them to his own style.
That makes a lot of sense, especially given his work with AI and his tendency to draw inspiration from existing narratives and archetypes. It's like he's taking those powers and remixing them, making them his own.
Right. So we've got the lab as a representation of his creative space, the robot as a symbol of his exploration of power and his creative process. But what about those really specific visual details? The single glowing red eye, the bowl-shaped head. What do those tell us?
Let's start with the eye. Eyes are often associated with perception, insight, awareness, and the fact that this robot only has one eye could symbolize a singular focus, a laser-like intensity directed towards a specific goal.
And the color red, that's usually associated with passion, energy, sometimes even danger or warning. Could it be a reflection of the intensity of his creative drive or the potential risks involved in pursuing such ambitious goals?
Those are all valid interpretations. And then there's the bowl-shaped head, which is definitely one of the more unusual details in this dream. What do you make of that?
A bowl is typically a vessel for holding something, right? So maybe in this context, it represents the robot's capacity for storing information, for absorbing the powers it scans, or maybe it's about receptiveness and openness to new ideas and experiences.
I like that. The bowl shape could also symbolize a unique perspective, a different way of processing information. It's like the robot is taking in all these powers and integrating them into its own unique worldview.
That's a fascinating thought. So we've got all these layers of meaning, from the overall setting and actions of the dream to the smallest visual details. What does it all add up to?
I think this dream paints a picture of a creator who is deeply engaged with technology, fascinated by the nature of power, and constantly striving to learn and adapt. He's ambitious, driven, and perhaps a little bit anxious about sharing his creations with the world.
That's a really insightful summary, and I think it resonates with a lot of people who are involved in creative work, whether it's writing, art, music, or even software development. There's always that tension between the desire to create something truly great and the fear of putting yourself out there.
Absolutely. And I think that's a valuable takeaway from this dream. It reminds us that it's okay to be both ambitious and vulnerable, to strive for excellence while acknowledging our imperfections.
Definitely. So what do you think our dreamer should take away from this dream? What questions should he be asking himself as he moves forward in his creative journey?
I think it's worth considering which superpowers he's most drawn to, both in the literal sense of the dream and in the metaphorical sense of his own creative work. What qualities or skills does he admire in others, and how can he cultivate those same strengths in himself?
And how can he navigate the anxieties that inevitably come with putting his work out into the world? How can he find that balance between striving for perfection and accepting that imperfection is part of the process?
Those are great questions. And ultimately, I think the most important thing is to keep creating, keep exploring, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. After all, that's what those holographic screens and superpower emulating robots are all about.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the April 2nd dream. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep creating, and keep sharing those dreams with us. We can't wait to see what other adventures await in the vast landscape of your subconscious.
See you next time.